President Trump is wielding every weapon he can to overthrow the corrupt British imperial financial system, which has suffocated this country for over 40 years. Right now, the battlefront is ending the Ukraine war.
I think he has to be realistic, and I do wonder about, how long is it going to be till they have an election? It's democracy. It's a long time. They haven't had an election in a long time. It's losing a lot of people. And it's possible that the people, if you look at the polls, I will say 82%, there was a poll that came out, 82% of the people are demanding a settlement be made, Ukrainian people. They want to see a settlement be made. I understand that. They're losing thousands and thousands of people a week. They do have a massive corruption situation going on there. And they do say, when are they, people are asking this question, when do they have an election? Are they going to have an election? Or are they going to just keep it going like this? So I think it's time to get that war settled. And I think it's a war that can be settled. But it takes two to tango.
What I just played is what the president has been saying all week about Ukrainian corruption, the lack of elections, and the European warmongers blocking peace. Here's another brief but explosive Trump comment about his conversations with Europe's big three, Macron, Starmer, and Merz.
I'd like to see the killing stop. 25,000 people died last month, soldiers, mostly soldiers, but some people also where bombs were dropped. But for the most part, 25,000 soldiers died last month. I would love to see it stop. And we're working very hard. It doesn't really affect the United States unless it got out of control. A thing like that, as you probably know, because you are a professional, a real professional, which is something I don't say about a lot of other people, but you are a great professional. Things like this end up in third world wars. And I told that the other day. I said, everybody keeps playing games like this. You'll end up in a third world war. And we don't want to see that happen.
And now there's a leaked document that reveals something even more revolutionary than last Friday's new national security strategy, a plan for a Core 5 alliance that could finally crush the globalists. Most people think the Ukraine peace negotiations are just about ending one war. They believe Trump is simply trying to broker a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine while Europe fights to continue the slaughter. But here's what they're not telling you. Europe's warmongers are determined to sabotage peace because they fear what they think is Trump's real plan. He's not just ending the Ukraine war. He's building a new revolutionary alliance of the United States, Russia, China, India, and Japan that would make the globalist empire obsolete. And the British know exactly what this means because they've been spent decades keeping these five powers at each other's throats. I'm Barbara Boyd. Since 1971, I've studied what kind of great power alliance could end the globalist financial dictatorship. That was when they ended the Bretton Woods system and launched the post-industrial consumer society that systematically exported our productive jobs to cheap labor locations throughout the world. I've documented the British role in Russiagate, Ukrainegate, and every operation against Trump's first term. And I can tell you, this Core 5 idea is their worst nightmare. Today, I'm going to show you three things. First, the status of Ukraine peace negotiations and how Europe keeps trying to sabotage them. Second, the leaked document outlining a possible Trump Core 5 alliance and why that's the only thing powerful enough to defeat the globalists. And third, proof that the British have known about this threat for years and have been working desperately to prevent it. And before we go on, please hit the like button and share this video. It increases our reach on YouTube. This X-Post gives a quick summary of what happened this week. Zelensky and the Europeans spent the entire week trying to find ways to sabotage Trump's peace plan. Exposing Zelensky's corruption is the president's new weapon of choice. The Europeans plotted all week how to steal $246 billion in frozen Russian central bank assets. These funds have been sitting in Brussels since the start of the war, and they want to use them as collateral for loans to continue the war. Think about that. The Russians rightly consider this outright theft. President Trump's peace plan commits these funds to the United States for reconstruction of Ukraine and joint U.S.-Russian investments. On Thursday, the EU invented emergency powers for itself and permanently barred the Russian funds from ever going back to the Russian central bank. These new emergency powers avoided a certain veto by Hungary and Slovakia, countries that actually want the war to end. Even Belgium, where most of the funds are held, opposes this robbery. Russia promptly sued to reclaim their funds, and that may very well kill the European loan plan. And get this, on Thursday also, Mark Rutte, the head of NATO, declared that NATO must now prepare for war with Russia. This is insanity. Meanwhile, the Washington Post claimed that a meeting between FBI Director Patel, Deputy Director Bongino, and Ukraine's lead peace negotiator was somehow an evil shakedown to force peace. They're trying to spin Trump's anti-corruption efforts as the problem when corruption is exactly why this war continues. This anti-corruption bureau running the Ukraine investigation is a joint venture of the Ukrainians and the American FBI. It's already resulted in the resignations of Zelensky's closest advisors. This is how you drain the swamp. You expose the corruption that feeds the war machine. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Defense One, the Washington trade publication covering the Pentagon, says it obtained a Trump administration document detailing a much broader strategy to completely reshape the world. Listen to this carefully. Quote, over the summer, President Trump made headlines when he lamented the expulsion of Russia from the Group of Eight as a very big mistake. He even suggested that he'd like to see China added to form a G9. His national security strategy proposes a Core 5 or C5 made up of the U.S., China, Russia, India, and Japan. It would meet regularly, as the G7 does, for summits with specific themes. First, on the C5's proposed agenda, Middle East security, specifically normalizing relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. The document also outlines a new anti-EU strategy. It lists Austria, Hungary, Italy, and Poland as countries the U.S. should work with more with the goal of pulling them away from the European Union. And it says we should support parties, movements, and intellectual and cultural figures who seek sovereignty and preservation of traditional European ways of life while remaining pro-America. Now, the White House denied this was a classified part of the released national security strategy, which the Defense One article implies. They said there was no other document other than what was released on Friday. So what is this? Was it leaked because it's under discussion internally and someone wanted to hurt the administration? Was it leaked as part of Trump's strategy to warn Europe what's coming if this war isn't settled? Is Defense One making this up? Well, I don't know really, but I doubt that it isn't somehow out in the stratosphere or nowhere. I do know this. Only an idea like the Core 5, moving U.S. strategy to the Pacific and away from the dying European Atlantic empire, holds the real potential to finally defeat the modern British financial empire and bring the world to peace. Lyndon LaRouche campaigned for a four-power alliance of Russia, China, India, and the United States. He believed Japan would be the first auxiliary to these four. He said these countries, with their large and technologically advancing populations, wielded an economic power and growth potential far greater than the dying globalist empire could ever muster. We see from the war we're in now to save the United States that these evil people still wield great power, primarily through media control of our credit, the drug trade, and straight-up psychological and cultural warfare operations. But imagine this. What if these five countries, maintaining their sovereignty and their own cultures, united to help develop the world economically and conquer space, launching a human scientific and technological renaissance? The power they would exert would dwarf anything the dying modern British financial empire and their Wall Street cronies could muster. President Trump clearly sees to cling to the old Atlantic security regime based in the city of London and Brussels will destroy us just as it's destroying them. We are fundamentally a Pacific power, and that's where our future lies. You can find out more about the Four Powers idea by subscribing to our free newsletter. The link is in the description. Now, in 2018, the British House of Lords published a remarkable report called UK Foreign Policy in a Shifting World Order. And guess what? It targeted 4 countries for British soft and hard power manipulation: the United States, Russia, India, and China. The potential 4 powers I just talked about. Their idea, as usual, was to keep these countries at each other's throats, or functioning under ideas like climate apocalypse that can smother their economic potential. I've documented the major role played by British intelligence in Russiagate, Ukrainegate, and all of the operations against Trump. I've also written about the Integrity Initiative, a completely British-controlled media targeting and censorship operation that went after anyone in the world opposing globalism. Donald Trump was its public enemy number 1. They hate Trump just as they hated and murdered all American presidents who practiced the unique American system brand of economics. Bob Ingram and I wrote an ebook about this, a police dossier. It's the British who murder our presidents. You can get it by following the link in the description. Listen now to the House of Lords complaining about Trump's 2018 UN speech. Trump told the General Assembly, quote, "America is governed by Americans. We reject the ideology of globalism and we embrace the doctrine of patriotism. Around the world, responsible nations must defend against threats to sovereignty, not just from global governance, but also from other new forms of coercion and domination." The British response? They said in Diplospeak that Trump cannot be allowed to have a second term. Here's their exact language. How damaging this will be to what has hitherto been the UK's most important international relationship will depend on whether the current approach is an enduring trend. Should President Trump win a second term or a similar administration succeed him, the damage to UK-US relations will be longer lasting, and the government will need to place less reliance on reaching a common US-UK approach to the main issues of the day. The report cites the International Institute for Strategic Studies, the most powerful British strategic institution, saying there were 2 constraints on Trump's hostile approach to the alliance in his first term. First, he had been dragged kicking and screaming by his cabinet to behave slightly better. Second, he was hemmed in by public attitudes, i.e., the American public supported traditional U.S. alliances along and I emphasize with both parties in the U.S. Congress and many controlled NGOs. Otherwise, they discussed how to impose a surveillance and censorship regime to prevent any future Trump-like movements in the U.S. or anywhere else. And that regime was imposed here before Elon Musk broke it up. It's now fully installed in Europe. So here's where we are. President Trump is fighting a war on multiple fronts. Europe's warmongers are trying to sabotage peace in Ukraine by stealing Russian assets and continuing the war. But Trump may have a bigger vision, a Core 5 alliance that could fundamentally reshape global power away from the dying British Empire and toward a future of economic development and peace. This isn't just about ending one war in Ukraine. This is about ending the entire system of forever wars, financial manipulation, and imperial control that has suffocated our nation for decades. The Core 5 alliance represents a future where sovereign nations cooperate to develop the world, conquer space, and unleash human creativity, instead of being kept divided and controlled by a dying empire. Join us at PrometheanAction.com. Subscribe to our newsletter for deeper analysis. And remember, the future belongs to builders, not destroyers, to creators, not controllers, to sovereign nations working together, not to empires keeping us apart. I'm Barbara Boyd. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next Monday.
Thanks for watching. please take a moment and subscribe to our free newsletter at prometheanaction.com.